Good morning, everybody. This is Stacey Calder from the Business Success Podcast, and I am joined today with the delightful Rachel Bennett. I'm not going to talk about the tech issues that we've just had, but you know it's going to be a really good podcast when you spend 30 minutes making sure that your guests can join you, because you don't want you guys to miss out. So I'm going to hand over to Rachel to introduce herself, and then we're going to get straight in, because this is a bit of a different podcast today. We're doing a 3-part podcast. That's how much juicy content Rachel has got to share with us. We're going to cover it over 3 parts. So Rachel, please do introduce yourself, and then we'll get cracking.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Stacey. So I'm Rachel Bennett. I own a company called HR Fusion, and I've just written a book, which is really strange to say out loud. And I'm literally just waiting for my first copy, physical copy, to have a look at it. And so, which is really scary, but really exciting. And yes, we have just had a good 20-25 minutes worth of tech issues caused by me, and my IT expert of turning on and off just didn't work. So thank you for your patience, and hopefully this will be worth it.
Oh, it absolutely will. It really will. So we're going to look at, you touched on HR there, and people might be thinking, oh, okay, I need a HR expert, or they might be thinking, no, HR is not my cup of tea. It's all about, disciplinaries and investigatories and all the reactive stuff. We talk about this quite a lot, don't we, Rachel, where HR can be quite reactive, but actually you're bringing almost some new terminology here. It's not something I'd heard before. When we talk about shadow cultures, it's not a phrase that I'd heard before I started speaking to you. And so this episode is really going to be great for not just HR consultants, but also anyone with, a business, decision makers, anyone with a team. And so I'm really keen to dig into this shadow culture and your journey, because your journey is fascinating as well. We've known each other for a long time, but obviously people watching this podcast, they may know you, they might not know you. So it's really important that we get a feel for your background. So the first question that I want to ask you then, Rachel, is obviously you will have had over the years many personal experiences, influences, and they've obviously led you to writing this book about company culture, let's say. Yeah. How did your journey shape your approach to writing it? What was it that made you say, I need to write a book now?
Okay, gosh. So I'm going to go right the way back to the beginning. So
we like the beginning.
Right at the back, and I'll try not to waffle. And anybody that knows me knows that I can talk for England, so I'll try not to. But yeah, right back at the beginning, back at school days, I was in the school era of all the school strikes, where all the teachers went on strike. The school I went to, the students actually went on strike as well in protest, etc. So, I had a great schooling. I had loads of fun. I had loads of mates. I didn't really do any schooling though, and I wasn't bothered about qualifications or a career or anything. I was just in the moment. I was with my mates, and I think back then it was very much, I was a female. I didn't really need to worry about things like that. In my head, I'm just going to meet a bloke and he's going to be rich and I'll have kids and it'll all be fine. The reality of life is not like that.
That's hilarious.
I met my now husband. I've been married for 32 years. I met him and married at 20. And I had my son at 21, and I can literally remember to this day, and it is in my book, there's a bit more of a story in there. I'd had him, and in that evening, I literally watched him in his little glass plastic cot thing, and he slept all night. And I was like, oh my life, I've got this baby I now need to look after. And I almost grew up overnight, and this kind of reality of, oh, I'm just gonna, like fly by the seat of my pants, realize that's not the case. The problem I had is that I couldn't read or write very well at all. So I've now got this kind of real intent to want to provide for this baby, but I didn't know how to, and I hadn't got the education that I needed. So whiz it forward a little bit more, I became a lifelong learner. Let's put it that way. I taught myself to read and write. And like I said, there's a little bit more in the book about it. But that enabled me to really learn as an adult the kind of what I wanted to do. And I went into photography, and then I went into accountancy. See, I went into accountancy because I thought there was no reading and writing. How wrong was I? For all those accountants out there, you're brilliant and you write reports a lot. And so I was snookered. So I had to go back to the bare bones and learn from the beginning. And so what happened then is I became this lifelong learner. I became addicted to learning. But the written word has always been something I've always thought I'm not good enough at, no matter how good I was. And I've got lots of qualifications. I built my career. That the last job I had, I was a director for 6 years. So I can write. I know my stuff. But it was still always there. I was still never good enough in my own head. And so what I did then was got to the point in my career as a director, and I love what I do. I love HR. I love organisational development. I have a massive amount of experience and qualifications in those parts of the industry now. And it was kind of, what's my next step? What do I want to do in my career? And I didn't want to go into an exec role because I really wanted to be hands-on. I still wanted to be in with the people, as it were. And so I decided to set my own business up. And in setting my own business up, which was only last year, I wanted to look at what is my business. And as you quite rightly say, when you say to people, I'm a HR person, they go, oh, you hire and fire people. And actually HR is so much more than that. You know, HR, strategic HR now, I've got a seat at the table in the exec, in boardrooms. They're looking at, you know, things like the Great Resignation. You know, what was that all about? You know, looking ahead, looking at industries, motivating people, you know, high performance. There's loads and loads of stuff. And so for me, it was kind of looking at, how do I put all this together? So I decided that actually the umbrella for all of it is company culture. Because for me, culture is very much about how you feel when you're at work, and other behaviours, and there's so much more. And so that's kind of where I went into that niche, and decided at that point to almost kill two birds with one stone. One was, I've always wanted to write a book, but never thought I was good enough. And the other was, I really wanted a niche into company culture. So I decided to write a book. That was fun.
No, that's a fascinating. When you first talked about your background there, and you said you went to school, it was fun, it was sociable, but actually you didn't learn what you should have. What would be expected of you now, and just hearing your love of learning progress from that. Because let's face it, that could have gone one or two ways. It could have gone absolutely not doing that, can't do it, haven't done it, never doing it. So actually, I need to do this. I want to do it. Actually, that's a really good lesson there for people that potentially were in the same situation as you. Even young people now that maybe don't get, they just didn't get on at school and they want to do something else or find a different way in. That's a really good example of actually, what you do at school doesn't necessarily define what you're going to do in the future. So
100%. And I've had so many conversations with so many people, and just said, there's this expectation on youngsters that they come out of school and they know what they want to be for the rest of their life. That's an absolute load of rubbish. You can change your career at 50. I'm 52 now, so 51 I set up my own business. Am I too old? Maybe. Who knows? I'll let you know in a couple of years. But I'm going to give it a go. And, I think my love for helping us all become our best selves has come through that journey I went on. Now, I'm very fortunate. I was brought up in a brilliant household. We never had loads of money. I had my mom and my dad and my brothers, and there was a real kind of Christian value set that I was brought up in. I then got married at 20. My husband and I have kind of been together, worked together, and he's supported me, and he's...
I have to ask, did he know your original life plan of, I'm going to find a guy, get married, have children, right off the skin of my pants?
He did. He just used to laugh at me and go, yeah, okay.
And now he's probably thinking, well, that didn't change.
hadn't factored in this thing called love. And I think in my head as a kid, I was, yeah, you just pick the one that's got the most money or that's got the most career prospects, or, you know, and then quite young, literally fell in love quite young. So, and you know what? He's been my rock. He's always been there. He's been the steady Eddie. He's always provided for us. And, you know, when I was studying and had 3 children, he'd take them away camping for the weekend so I could write my dissertations. And, you know, it's a real partnership, which is why I say I'm very lucky that, you know, I started off basically just gaming around as a kid and being a child, but I learned a lot of my social kind of skills, I think, when I was a kid, because I was allowed to be in groups of people, and you know, we had so much fun. But I just forgot the educational bit and then picked that up as an adult when I wanted to. And I think that is the crucial part, is society puts us in this almost this kind of cage, as it were, not cage, but like a process where we kind of go, oh, okay, well, we're born, then we go to school, and then we get a job, and then we get married, then we have kids, then we have grandchildren, blah, blah. And that's kind of this linear pattern that people are supposed to follow. And I just think, no, follow what makes you happy, follow what you love, and try and be your best self. And that's all I've ever tried to do. So my book was very much about putting my own demons to bed, as well as, you know, showing people that I know what I'm talking about, and I'm an experienced kind of consultant. So yeah.
You absolutely know what you're talking about. And I know we've had conversations before where we've been talking about, right, what we're going to talk about on the podcast, what are we going to do with this? And actually we've spent a couple of hours in a coffee shop. Yes. It was talking about this sort of stuff, but it wasn't necessarily the plan that we were doing. So no, we absolutely both know that we're on a time limit here, otherwise this
absolutely
could go on for hours. So I am going to get to the next question, because I want to hear more about this book, but also, like, you know, you've talked about company culture, and I think when people hear that, they kind of get it. They'll have their experiences come to their mind. They'll be thinking, oh yeah, we've got a great culture at work, you know, we've got, and it might be something like a well-being Wednesday, or we've got a mental health team, or we've got, you know, all these things in place that make it this great company culture. Or they might be thinking, that's a tick box exercise, you know, they don't care about us, we're just a number. So there will be different reactions to that phrase, company culture. But you've took it kind of one step further, and you've talked about shadow cultures. And that might make people think, well, what's a shadow culture? How does that compare to a company culture, or how does it follow on? So you've obviously written a book on this, which is a massive undertaking. And I'm sure there were many moments throughout that writing of the book and your journey where, you know, you've had some turning points, or, you know, things of your situations have impacted how you've written that book and your perspective on the topic. Do you want to just kind of share some of those moments with us that you've,
of course,
you know, that took you on that journey, and that you've written about these shadow cultures?
And it's a really interesting one, because the book was always going to be about culture, but it's not the book that I started to write, if that makes sense.
And you hear that quite a lot from writers. And I mean, I'll hold my hands up. I've been writing a book for, well, probably since we met 15 years ago. And like you said, there's 10 different versions, there's 5 different copies, there's 7 different beginnings. There isn't an end yet.
Absolutely. So, and that conversation we need to have in our next coffee meeting. We need to talk about your book, but never mind. We'll move on for now. I'll leave you alone for a second.
Let's go back to yours.
So basically, over the years, quite a few years ago, I did a qualification in psychology of organisational development, and I loved it. And I had an amazing tutor, and she taught us around the psychology side of change management, so the behavioural side and different things. And she taught us through different models, etc. I can't remember, it's probably about 10 years ago. And I took that into the workplace and played with it. And over the last sort of 10 years, I have played with that model. I've read lots of books. I've got lots of notes from lots of different books. And I've kind of gone, oh no, I don't agree with that. I prefer this bit here and I prefer this. And over the years, I basically created this 6-step model, which we'll talk about in podcast 3, I think. So I won't go into more detail there, but that model I've used over the last few years or so. I've used parts of it for a long time, but the model as a whole I've used over the last few years. And so in my head, when I decided that I wanted to focus on company culture, the logical side was that model would be part of the book. But then I kind of was like, oh, I need to explain what company culture is and go into company culture more. So what I did was had all these ideas, but just didn't know where to go. I then found through networking a book mentor, Karen Williams, who is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. There's loads of book mentors out there, but Karen Williams is, for me, she was exactly what I needed. She's got a very calming personality, and she kind of almost coaches you back when you're writing things. So I got in touch with her. I did her online course over last Christmas, where I'd got all my ideas of my book, and I did her course over the 6 weeks to embed what I thought I needed. I then signed up and went on her book retreat in Spain, which was partly a bit of a treat, and partly it was I was so anxious and so nervous about this whole journey. I just decided if I put lots of nice things in there as well, it would kind of help me kind of take the bitter pill.
Actually, we're talking about company cultures, and when you are self-employed, when you've got your own business, you don't necessarily have, these rewards and these treats in place. So it's really important that you do that. And, you said there, Karen was a mentor that you knew you needed at the time. She fit into your style, your personality. And I mean, this podcast is already full of some real golden nuggets there. If people aren't picking these out, find a mentor that works for you, that suits your personality. Reward yourself along the way, because times are going to get tough. I can imagine this book went out the window a few times, and then
it did. Absolutely. And so what happened then is because I was so anxious about not being able to write my book properly, I did my first draft before I went to the Spain retreat, and I took it there, and I was, oh gosh, this like Karen's going to say it's rubbish and all the rest of it, and she didn't, by the way, which is great news. But what she did do is I talked to her a little bit in a one-to-one coaching session about my journey, and my journey over the last few years before I went self-employed had become really hard, and I loved my job, and I think in some respects I love my job too much and I worked too hard, and that's probably the best way of explaining it. And obviously with COVID and everything else and being in HR, I was in the housing industry, and we had 600 care workers, and you can imagine, so myself and my team all my life, we went from exhausted to super exhausted. And so I was in a really dark, not very great place as a person. I didn't know where to turn. I didn't know what to do. And I was holding an awful lot of baggage. And a lot of it, I'm not somebody that blames other people for things. So I was holding it all, and I was blaming myself for everything. And so I was in a dark place, which is why it took a lot for me to do the book. And Karen said to me, okay, when you're on the book retreat, what I think you should do is write your bit about you, which I can't now remember what it's called, but the bit at the beginning that you write about yourself, the intro. And I was like, oh my life, I can't do this. I can't open up. I just can't do that. So I went on the book retreat with my book already drafted, thinking, I'll just say to Karen, I don't need to do that beginning bit. We can look at the book. And the book was, at that point, was in two halves. The first half was all about 6 different cultures that I'd picked out that were popular cultures. And the second half was the model. Anyway, there's a lady there that was on the course as well, and she is also a mentor, Cheryl Andrews,
which is fascinating, because I network with Cheryl. She's brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
She literally changed. She is the reason the book changed, because she decided, well, we were having a conversation, and I think she intuitively picked up that there was something that I was holding it back, because I was kind of British stiff upper lip, I'll just hold it.
You work,
yeah. And I'm used to helping everybody else, right? So I'm not used to people helping me, although 1,000,001 people have helped me. So anyway, to cut a long story short, she did this exercise, which I won't go into detail about, but if you need help, please get hold of Cheryl, because she is genius. But she did this exercise with me, and the penny dropped. And I was talking to her, and I said to her, my words were, yeah, well, I became a shadow of my former self. And the minute the words came out, I just looked at her and I went, oh my life, this book is about a shadow culture. And she was like, you've got it. And at that point, the book changed. The first half of the book changed into shadow cultures, and we'll go into more detail on shadow cultures on the next podcast. But the shadow is this, it's the unsaid thing, it's the feeling that we all get when things are not quite right, but it's not tangible, it's not the values on the wall, it's that unspoken part. So I was completely fascinated.
That gut feeling, isn't it? That gut instinct that you've got, but you can't quite, your brain doesn't say it's this or this, it's your gut saying.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it is very much that, you know, and like I said, we'll talk more about it because I honestly could go on forever. But that was the pinnacle part. So, you know, for me, I put myself purposely in a space that was away from home. I put myself in a space that I could feel as comfortable as possible to, I suppose, find the real me at that point, because I was in such a bad place that I knew by the time I went to Spain, I was a lot better because I've been self-employed for sort of 5-6 months. So I was starting to get a bit more momentum and had done some work and had some fantastic feedback. And so I was definitely on my kind of recovery journey, but there was a bunch of ladies like me there writing books. So that was fab because I had people to talk to and go, oh my life, this is painful, isn't it? And they were like, yeah, it is. But then I had Karen with her very calm demeanor and, you know, this kind of like, it's all going to be fine, let's just trust in the process and follow the process. And then I had Cheryl, who emotionally almost took me apart and put me back together again. If that's even a thing.
Yeah, it is. And I absolutely agree. Sometimes you need that. And like you said, you know, being a HR director, being the person that everybody goes to, you know, and you've got it from all angles. You've got it when you're HR director, you've got it from the board, you've got it from, you know, the team that you're directly working with, you've got it from the team underneath you, your team, you've then got the employees, and it's very hard, and you feel like everybody is coming at you. And actually, when you're a leader like that, it's really important that you have somewhere to go and, like you say, offload and make sure that you're okay and that you're feeling tip-top condition, because how can you put this great culture in place if you're suddenly feeling burnt out, overwhelmed? But it's really hard as leaders, and I understand this because, you know, I run a community and people, they do come to you. You know, I had 3 one-to-ones last week, and actually by the end of them I was thinking, I'm really pleased that they've opened up and they're okay. That was not what I was expecting. You do feel, and then you're like, okay, who am I offloading to now? And you said you've got a really supportive husband. I think, that's brilliant, isn't it? But sometimes if you're writing a book and it's taking you into an uncomfortable place, and it doesn't have to be a book, it could be anything, couldn't it? But you need somebody, you need your cheerleader, whether it's your husband, your best friend, a mentor, in that space to say, it's okay, this is part of the process, but you're not camping out here, and actually let's get you to the end. And I think by the sounds of it, that retreat was amazing, but it actually, you know, and Karen was fantastic. You then met Cheryl, and it was almost like them two were cheerleading you.
And they were, absolutely. And, you know, the retreat, just to finish off that part, the retreat, you know, it was really emotional. It was really relaxed. And we did lots of, you know, we went to the beach one day and different things. So it was relaxed. So it was, I was able to find my emotion at my own pace. And that's not actually what the book retreat was about either. It was like supposed to be about writing the book, but now I kind of took it on a whole different little journey. But, you know, Karen had asked me to consider writing my kind of intro to who I was. And what I didn't know at the time is we got to the end of the retreat, and she asked everybody, but she asked me if I wanted to, so there was no pressure, if I wanted to then read it out. So you can imagine, for me, coming from my journey from the last sort of 30 odd years of this kind of really, you know, having this vulnerability around reading and writing, I'm a proper bookworm, so, you know, but reading my story out loud, and I did, and it was quite emotional, and all my new group of friends were clapping and saying it was really great and really supportive, And so I left the book retreat on a proper, I can do this. I've opened my skeletons out of my cupboard. I've addressed them. I am now stronger from this. I am capable of doing this. So let's get and write the book.
And you had that whole team of cheerleaders around you, and they were clapping you.
Yeah, absolutely. And they were amazing. And the journey from that point, that was February of last year, and I have rewrote and redone and rejigged and everything else, the book, and you know, towards the end of the book, when I got my final draft, I've had somebody come in and do all my editing for me. Karen did she did a couple of days work on it, and then somebody's publishing it for me. So I've got the journey didn't stop there. So yes, Karen and Cheryl were amazing and still are amazing through that journey, and they're still with me now through the journey. But then toward the end of the journey, I picked up a couple more kind of, you know, experts way, and hopefully the book will be published, I think, 24th of November. And so, but the scariness doesn't go away, because my kind of personality now is, what if it's not any good? What if people don't like it? What if, you know, what if? And so I have to catch myself all the time and go, yeah, but what if people do like it? But what if it doesn't make a difference? You know?
Exactly. And I've coached a few authors before. In fact, they're not authors, they are business owners that have gone on to write a book. And I remember one person that it was about accountability with her. But I remember her publisher saying to her, you are not going to be over the shoulder of every single person that reads this book.
Absolutely.
Once it's published, it's not your book anymore.
Absolutely.
You've got to let it go. And people will have they'll have different opinions.
Yes.
And actually that's okay, because what the book is doing for you is drawing people into your audience and saying, wow, Rachel really knows her stuff. There will be people that say, oh, I'm not quite sure about that, but they're not your people. These are the people that, but there will be people that are, you know, they look at it and they say, wow, that is actually, I get it now. I understand why I feel the way I do, or the way the office feels like that. Brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, my goal in all of this was to use my experiences and almost have my own legacy of, you know, I've worked very hard in my career and my education, and I've always done it with the best intention. Never always got it right, but I've always done it from an authentic point of view and with the best intention. And that's what this book is about. This book is about what I believe and what I have learned over the years to impart on other people, to help other people, so that we can create the best possible workplaces. And it's come from a very authentic place, which is why my story, if telling my story today, is important to me, because it might just inspire or help other people that have been in similar situations to kind of go, you know what, I can change this.
I'm really pleased you said that, because the third and final question that I'm going to ask you is around inspiration. It is around, you know, the journey that you've been on, but we've talked quite a lot about these tips for other people as we've gone through quite naturally. You know, you've dropped some real golden nuggets in there about culture and about mentors and things like that. But so as an author, because that's what you're going to be, you know, very, very soon, it's coming out. People will be looking at you and thinking, oh, she's written a book, I'd love to do that. Or, you know, there might be something in there that, you know, they're thinking, oh, I could never write a book. You know, we've all had those different thoughts. Or what have I got to say? Or would it be a book? Or, you know, what advice or even some insights would you offer to those people that are maybe researching writing a book? They're thinking about it. They're aspiring to have this marketing asset, this book, this, like you said, this legacy. If they wanted to embark on that, you know, the similar journey to you, then what kind of top tips would you give them?
Okay, so the first top tip is you've got to find a topic that you are passionate about. And when I mean passionate, I mean really passionate about, because it takes a lot. And some days, you know, if you went and got a book mentor like Karen, for example, she'll talk to you about, you know, where the best place to write is and what the best time to write is, and then having that kind of schedule, etc. Sometimes you get up and you think, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do it, but you've got to have the passion. You've got to have the passion first of all. So that's the very first thing, is you've really got to want to do this. Even if you don't know how to do it, you've got to want to do it. So that would be my first one. The second one would be to then I'm a note taker, always have been. And so for me, I've got a notepad next to me now. I carry notepads with me everywhere. So literally, once you've kind of got a broad spectrum, so it doesn't have to be your niche yet, then go out and research and find what makes you what hits inside, what makes you tingle, what makes you passionate. If you're watching the news, what triggers you. So it's really finding that niche and that passion there, and then take lots of notes. And that's what I did. And I took notes for a good 10 years, and I've got lots of notepads. Honestly, I'm not joking. Got notepads all over the place. And then when you've got all of that, my personal advice would be get yourself a mentor, get yourself somebody that knows what they're doing. I have read a couple of books on how to write a book, and they're brilliant, really good, but it was never enough to get me off the starting line, because I still had to rely on myself. Whereas when I've got a mentor, I've got accountability, and I know that I've got to have something done by a certain time. So there is that as well. But the biggest tip is, don't try and eat the elephant whole.
Absolutely.
And that's why for everybody, it's one step at a time. Your first step might be get a notepad and start making some notes, and do that for 6 months. That's it. That's all you need to do. Just make some notes for 6 months. After 6 months, look at your notepad and go, okay, so where's my trends? And you'll find your passion that way, because you'll look at it and go, oh, my life, I'm writing so much about this subject and not so much about these. So let's focus on this subject. So there's a lot of sticky notes with my best friend. I was sticky.
Well, you say that I'm a bullet journal. I'm a notebook take. My husband goes mad because I will come home with yet another notebook. Some of them are too nice to use, but when you're on the go, your phone, you've got a note section in your phone.
Absolutely.
And I see things and I'm like, right, copy and paste that into the notes. I'll come back to that. It'll go in my notebook when I get home.
Absolutely.
So don't be afraid to, if you're on the go and you think of something, get it in your notes section.
Absolutely. I think it is literally start somewhere, follow it everywhere. That is kind of the nugget of all of that, is just start it, and it doesn't matter how small it is. Get a notepad, make a note once a week. That's fine. The journey's your own journey. It took me 10 years of writing notes to actually get to the point of, right, I'm going to do it. And I'd gone down a journey, and I actually ended up writing my book at my most vulnerable in the whole of my working career. So it took me to be almost rock bottom to then pull myself out, and the book was how I did it. So you'll know when the time is right, but just prep for that time now. So
and you're right. Actually, you are. And I can't. Everything you're saying, I'm nodding, and I'm going, and we're on a podcast. So unless you're watching this on YouTube, you won't see me nodding. But I am agreeing with everything Rachel is saying. And I said earlier that I'd written a book, and it's got 10 endings and 17 beginnings, and there's some middle in there as well. But I started to write that when I was I'd just sold a company, and I was in a very not probably angry, probably I don't like the word bitter, but I probably was a little bit. There was lots of emotion, very raw emotion. And so, at one point I was probably stabbing the keyboard with my fingers. That was not the right time to write the book. And actually that's why I parked it. Now, like you said, now you've been through that journey, it's probably a better time to relook at it. Absolutely. So I love the fact that the first part of today's podcast has been about you and your journey to those shadow cultures, that company culture. I love the fact that we've talked about it started as one thing. You've been on a retreat, you've listened to other people, you've almost had that light bulb moment where you've gone, I'm a former, a shadow of my former self. I love that. I love that then you've kind of grabbed this shadow culture by your both hands and gone, this is it. Absolutely. I think it's been fascinating to talk to you about your journey. We could, there's years of your journey and we could cover loads, but we have talked for 35 minutes. And so the next part is going to be about exploring those shadow cultures. So if you've listened to part 1, as I said at the start, this is going to be a 3-part episode. We could not have covered all this in one session. So Rachel is with us for another 2 sessions. So session 2 is going to be exploring those shadow cultures. What is a shadow culture? How did Rachel, how do we break those down? That kind of thing. And then the third part we're going to look at is Rachel's 6-step model to cultural change, which is where, you know, people can look at their workplaces, their, you know, the teams within the teams and things like that. Rachel, it's been fantastic to talk to you today.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been
Even with
good
the
fun.
tech issues,
I
we
know.
got there.
We did indeed.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Do check out the Business Success Network podcast. We are available on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube, and all other streaming platforms. Please head over, if you're not already in our community, to Facebook and search Business Success Network UK. You'll find myself, you'll find Rachel in there, who will be happy to answer any questions on shadow cultures. And I'm really looking forward to part 2. So do join us now for part 2.